Thank you, Roland, for the nice introduction. As he said, my name is Kristina Wandzilak, and I'm the Executive Director of Full Circle Intervention. I'm here today to talk about intervention a little bit, and also to talk about strategizing in some difficult cases. So, I thought about this a lot since Roland asked me to speak some time ago about how I wanted to present this to you. And I came up with this really great idea, I thought. Instead of, I think a lot of my ideas are great, but some people don't agree, so I hope you agree with this one. That I thought that instead of me talking for an hour about intervention, which I could certainly do and then some, that I would share with you just briefly about the model of intervention I use, but then I also invited 2 of my clients to come and share with you their personal experience with intervention, with the invitational type of intervention, and these 2 also happen to be 2 of the most difficult cases, with all due respect, in the last few years that I've had. So I thought that would be more exciting to you to hear a first-hand account. And frankly, I think it'd be interesting for me to hear, a first-hand account. And none of this is scripted, so I have no idea what they're going to say. Hopefully it's all positive since it's being filmed. But so with that, let me just briefly share with you the model of intervention that I use. I think so many of you know this, so I'll run through it relatively quickly. But I do the systemic intervention. I use an invitational model of intervention. The reason I do an invitational model of intervention for a few reasons. I have come to, over the years, believe that the surprise type of intervention can be very disrespectful. I believe that it colludes with the disease of addiction, which is about shame and secrets. And secondly, I believe that, I've totally forgot. I'm so sorry. Oh, I remember. I believe that intervention is a family disease. I believe intervention is a family disease. Addiction is a family disease. I believe addiction happens to families, not individuals. And so when I came into the industry a long time ago, I got very interested in the process of intervening on families, not just intervening on addicts. So that's what I wanted to talk to you today about briefly. What I like about the systemic intervention or the invitational approach is that it is proactive, it's inclusive, and it's family focused. So it hits all those important pieces that I talked about. What I've come to learn in families that are affected by addiction is that there must, that the addicted individual holds all the power in a family. Yeah? So what I've watched over the years, I've watched family systems hang the health of their whole family system on their most dysfunctional member. Does that make sense? So the thought is, when he's ready to go to treatment, then I will do this. When she's this, I will do that. And that's exactly the paradigm that has to shift. In an enmeshed relationship, which is codependent and addict by nature, or family and addict by nature, the lowest functioning person sets the norm. Does that make sense? So what happens in my office, when families arrive in my office, everybody's operating on an addictive level. Does that make sense? Right? Keeping secrets, tiptoeing, not wanting to rock the boat, whatever it is. So the whole family is operating on that level. And frankly, I don't want the most dysfunctional member in a family system directing the intervention process. Does that make sense? So we hold the norm. The family, the intervention process, we hold the norm and expect the addicted individual to come and meet us as opposed to going to meet them. What I like about the systemic process when I work with families, what I talk to them a lot about, which you'll hear later, is that families need to lead by example. Instead of sitting back and waiting for the addict to do something, right? When they're ready to get help, then I'll do this. What I've learned is that families can lead by example. So something I do, every family I work with, the length of our contract, there is no drinking, no using of any kind. The family goes to Al-Anon or 12-step groups. Whatever the family was doing to try and control or contain the addiction, they stop doing. So essentially what I've learned is when the family leads, the addicted individual will follow. That's a powerful statement. That's a powerful statement. and something I have come to learn. That when I can help families find the strength to move forward one step at a time, let go of the outcome of that, the addicted individual will follow. It's a rare case that an addicted person wakes up in the morning and goes, oh my God, today's the day. I'm going to change. Right? And so the power of this type of intervention is when I get a call, when somebody calls my office, somebody in that family has hit bottom. Somebody in that family is ready for change. Somebody in that family is ready to do something different, and I never understood why we had to wait for the addict to be that person. My message to families is you don't. You're ready for change, we can do that. With or without the addicted individual. Makes sense? Stephanie Brown, Dr. Stephanie Brown from the Addictions Institute in Menlo Park, who happens to be one of my great mentors, talks about that a lot. That the addicted individual does not have to hit bottom before a family can get help. Sorry, I think my caffeine just kicked in. Like I'm on fire about that. I want to talk about that slide for a long time. Better move on. So, the intervention, systemic intervention is a family intervention. That's hard for some people to understand, but like I said, I believe that addiction happens to family systems. This is the greatest quote I've ever found of any addictions. Look, you're all looking. Wow. Don't pay attention to me, pay attention to the quote. Best quote I've ever found in any text, and to my dismay, it came from the Al-Anon text. Which, if you know my story, Al-Anon ruined my life when I was 16. But, whenever families remain uninvolved in their own recovery process or program, the seeds of the illness are passed on to the next generation. We need to move from treating addicts and alcoholics to treating alcoholism and drug addiction, which is a family disease. In every intervention I work with families, we do a family genogram, just looking at the family disease in the system. I feel really strongly about this too. When I have a family come to my office, and I have a mother who's 350 pounds, and a father who drinks every night, and they want me to intervene on their 19-year-old kid who's smoking OxyContin, fair enough, but we need to have a really frank conversation about addiction. Because let's think about it, right? You can't be surprised if your son is using OxyContin if there's food addiction and other alcoholism in the family, yeah? I mean, you can't be surprised if you're drinking every night and you have alcohol at every celebration, from religious holidays to kindergarten fundraisers and everything else in between. You cannot be surprised when your 19-year-old kid goes out and uses alcohol. Let's have a frank conversation about that. So you can tell how often I'm hired. It's about here that families are like, so anyway, thank you. We'll move on. So, we look at a family tree and look at all compulsive behaviors in family systems. From, and also mental illness, depression, bipolar, alcoholism, eating disorders. I mean, we know that these, come through families. So let's look at that. And the powerful part of that is that it reduces the shame for the addicted individual, and it reduces the shame for the family. Does that make sense? It's like breast cancer. It runs in families. Let's look at it. Let's be honest about it. The hard part about being honest is once you acknowledge an issue, you then are responsible for changing it, which is the greatest resistance. And I mean, getting addicts to go to treatment is the easiest part of intervention. Shifting a family into a direction of recovery, shifting a family system into the direction of change is profoundly difficult, as you all are aware. Like I said, believe that addiction's a family disease, and therefore family and addicts share the same signs and symptoms of the disease of addiction. And over time, oh dear, I don't know how I got this slide so fancy. I have to push the button like 800 times. Hold on. I have no idea how I did that. Anyway, you know, family descends together into the disease of addiction. You know, addict has their own denial system, that I'm okay, that it's not as badass, but family does too. You know what I hear all the time? That it's Marin Catholic. Did you guys know that? Marin Catholic's the problem. Or Branson, actually. Actually, it's Marin County. Marin is the problem. And the boyfriend is always the problem. And those of you that go to public school, well, then that's the problem. I have parents tell me what we need to do is figure out how to get our daughter into Marin Catholic, because Redwood is the problem. Right? So everyone has their own sense of denial. It's not the fact that your daughter's smoking meth at night, it's Redwood. There's an increased tolerance, of course. Addicts have a tolerance to a substance, but families gain tolerance to addictive and abusive behaviors. Do you know, when families come to my office, I had this is a true story. And you'll hear other true stories shortly, but true story, a mother telling me just casually that her son threw a chair at her. Like you would say, hey, I had toast for breakfast. Just sitting in the office, oh, sorry, I forgot my purse because my son threw a chair at me. But anyway, so I was going, right? So no clue how her life had been affected by addiction. So you get the idea. Preoccupation, everyone settles for less. So how does it work, right? I mean, that's why I do this model. How does it work? People are always baffled by this. I have to tell you, people always say to me, so really? Like you invite them? Like what do you mean you invite them? Like you invite them, but you don't tell them that it's intervention, right? So yeah, it's that simple. You just tell the truth. It's so fucking mind-blowing, that's it. You just tell the truth. The truth is this: I love you, I'm not okay losing you to a treatable disease, I'm terrified, I'm sick to my stomach at night, you may not want help, I do. You may not be ready to change, but I am, and I've hired help, and we're having a family intervention next Friday and Saturday. I really hope you come. But I gotta be honest, with or without you, I gotta move forward. That's it. And it's so profoundly effective and mind-blowing for everyone involved. I can't tell you, but I'll tell you, once that invitation happens, the intervention is underway. I tell families that all the time. That's the power in it. You just let it go. Oh, I'm so excited for you to hear from, because it's so powerful. Eva, that you'll hear from shortly, her daughter called me, her daughter Heidi called me and said to me, she was looking around for intervention, right? And this is common, wanting to help her mom, who was going to die untreated. You were going to die. Heidi, not wanting to disrespect her mom, doesn't want to do the surprise intervention, but doesn't know that there's another option, so waited years. I say to Heidi, just tell her, just invite her. Yeah, Kristina, but she won't come. Okay, I appreciate that, but why don't you just invite her? And she did. And she came. Not happily, but they come. Intervention begins. The family must be clear, though, with or without the person we're moving forward. Intervention, I'll tell you why, too. Whether Eva came or not, whether Jeremy, Joe's son, came to the intervention or not, we have intervention. Why? Because we're intervening on a disease, not a person. I don't intervene on people. I intervene on a disease that has two parts: the active addiction and the codependency, yeah? I actually, believe it or not, don't need the addict in the room to do an intervention. Right? Nope. I don't need an addict in the room to do an intervention. I need the codependents in the room to do an effective intervention. So if I collapse the codependent structure, I very effectively intervene on the active addiction. I'm not going to talk about all this because you know it. So the keys to the intervention is to collapse that enabling system. Do you know that? Some of my most effective interventions have been when the addict hasn't even come. And yes, I mean that the addict goes to treatment too. Behind every great addict, there is an equally great codependent or cast of codependents. that unintentionally allow our disease to progress and continue. That is the truth of it. You find that codependent, you find that cast of characters, you collapse that, and very effectively will intervene on active addiction, whether the person's in the room or not. And then you encourage family recovery, which is beautiful and difficult, actually. So the process, there's a phone inquiry, assessment, intervention, and then aftercare, of course, which is the key to intervention and long-term recovery. I like this. I'm going to go through this quickly so Joe can come up and talk. But the recovery bus, I use this a lot in intervention because actually I'm embarrassed that I think this is the only thing that people remember. But, you know, I tell this to families like we have a recovery bus, right? And I'm like the bus driver, you know, like beep, beep, here I am. And, you know, everyone has tickets, you know, everyone has tickets. But the truth is this bus is pulling out of the station on this day. We are pulling on, we're moving on to greener pastures. You're welcome to get on the bus at any time. You know, there's stops along the way. There's the family intervention workshop. There's aftercare meetings. And, you know, there's all these stops along the way. And you're welcome to get on at any point. But this bus, this family, is leaving the station. That's how I talk about family intervention. And you know what's funny about this analogy, which I have to be honest, this is from Joanne Toll. I stole from her years ago, which she's aware, so don't worry. This is the funny thing. I'll get calls from families, and they'll say, oh no, Granny got off the bus. You know, Granny got off the bus and paid his rent. You know, it's like a great, something that families can hold on to. So that was 17 years of work in about 12 and a half minutes. But really, I want to introduce the other speakers, which is where I think the real interest is, to be frank. So I think the first person that's going to come up is Jo, and she's going to talk about her intervention case. And I want to run through that real quickly with you, and then she can talk about her experience. I intervened on Jo and her son, Jeremy, when Jeremy was 19. What makes her case so difficult, what made this case so difficult, was that Jo has 3 suicides in her family: a husband, a brother, and a sister. So when her only son, her beloved son, her and her son against the world for all this time. Jo's also in recovery, by the way, 20 years herself. So it was her and Jeremy all this time. When Jeremy became addicted, she had this tremendous fear that if I intervene, I will lose him to suicide. Yet, if I don't intervene, I'm going to lose him to suicide or addiction. So it was a profoundly difficult case that way. I mean, that's what makes intervention so fragile. You know, you're dealing with real people and real lives, and the addict's just one piece of it. So when I met with her, she was very terrified. We did the intervention. She told Jeremy about it. He told me to fuck off, and that was okay. We did the intervention anyway. He went to treatment because of the work with Jo. I want to fast forward just a little bit. And Jo had severe codependency with her son, if that's the term you want to use it, taking care of, paying rent, managing, all these things. Yeah? I want to fast forward just 2 years because Jeremy relapsed, but Jo did not. Jeremy came to his mom and said, I need help, and Jo said, you need to call Kristina. So he did, and he was smoking OxyContin. So we did a second intervention. That second intervention was actually filmed for Addicted on TLC and aired nationally on TLC. So again, thank you for being willing to open your life, you know, for that show. But you know, we filmed the second intervention, and I think her story's so profound because even though he relapsed, she didn't. He said to her, call Kristina, and he did. He called me. We got help, and here they are today. The second speaker is Eva, and I shared briefly with her. I got a call from her daughter wanting to intervene on her. The reason her case was so difficult, and really difficult, because Eva was married at the time to an individual who was also addicted, who also tried to kill himself when Eva tried to help herself prior to calling me. Does that make sense? So they're both addicted, very progressed in their addictions. And Eva's held hostage by the fear that he'll kill himself if she leaves and gets better. And he made that profoundly, he made that clear. I'll die without you. So then Eva's family, 3 children, grandchildren, Eva's family all suffering, missing her because her life is becoming more and more isolated. She's ashamed, she's drinking, nobody comes to her house anymore, she doesn't go out anymore, she can't, she's drinking all night, she's there with her husband who's drinking all night, nobody can leave. Very difficult case. How do you do this? How do you access somebody that's seemingly inaccessible? You can't do the surprise type of intervention because Eva would say, I'm just going home to Doug. Somehow, we had to involve them both. Does that make sense? That's why intervening on a couple can be so difficult. He got in the way. He was in between the family and her and getting help. So I'll let her talk about that wonderful experience. But I'll tell you what I love about both these cases is that they're just such beautiful examples of this type of intervention and that they got help. Eva came to the intervention, even though I told you her daughter said there's no way she'll come. But you came. And then at the intervention, the daughter pulled me inside and said, well, I'm glad she's here, but there's no way she's going to go to treatment. Okay. Let's trust the process. At the end of intervention, Eva went to treatment that day. And so did her husband. And Heidi said to me, well, there's no way she's going to stay. Anyway, not only did she stay 30 days, not only did she stay 60, but she stayed 90. And actually celebrated over a year sober just a few weeks ago, May 8th, right? So, and that's one of my favorite parts of my work, by the way, to get a text from Eva and then from her daughter, inviting me to be there, for that celebration of a year sober. It speaks, volumes to the work and to intervention.
I introduced myself and I said I had 19 years sobriety and I had done 2 interventions, but it was for my son, not myself. But that's really not true because quite frankly, this intervention process saved my life. And I get so emotional about it because truly it did. It saved my son's life. I would rather have been out on the streets using again than to go through the pain of watching my son and his addiction. That's how hard it was. When I was out there using, it was only about me. I didn't think about anybody else. But to watch my son kill himself slowly and not know what to do, to be held hostage by that fear, because my husband had killed himself, my brother and my sister within 5 years, all to addiction, I was paralyzed. I really was. And I thought I knew about addiction and recovery. I thought that I would recognize it, but I didn't. I didn't see it through the first DUI. I didn't see it through the second DUI. I didn't see it when my son was 13 and I got a call from the school that he was unconscious with alcohol poisoning, right? I didn't see it when he would stay up for days at a time. It's just a phase. Kristina's right, your tolerance goes up. Right? You accept more. And I had just gotten married. So I had a new husband, and I wanted to make sure everything was okay. So I was always in between my son and my husband. So I was carrying a lot to make sure everybody was okay. I am your classic codependent. My picture's probably in the dictionary. I'm serious. I did everything for my son. I saved him again and again. But I wasn't saving him. Really, I wasn't, because I wasn't letting him hit his bottom. I wasn't letting him have his consequences. And he was slowly slipping away. And one day, in August of 2007, this is so vivid because this was my bottom. I came home from work early, and my son came home. And I know he probably thought that I was still at work. And he had been up all night. I'll never forget this. He had on like a wife beater and these shorts and like one purple sock, and he was spun out. And when he walked in the door, I saw his father, my husband who had died, who was also a meth addict. And it was that powerful. It's like, my son is going to die if I don't do something. This is over. So I called Azure Acres. They said, call Kristina. I called Kristina. She said, read my book. So
After I spent a little time talking to her.
Well, it wasn't quite like that, but she was right. So I got the book and I read it. And that story was so powerful because I could understand from an addict, Kristina's story, but what really spoke to me was her mother's story about the codependency. That's what got me. And I got it. And I was so afraid to do this intervention. I was terrified. I was terrified that Jeremy was going to be mad at me. Why the fuck should I care if he's mad? He needs to get well. But I could not let go of that fear. But Kristina coaxed me through it. And I invited him, and he basically told me to fuck off. And Amy Winehouse's song Rehab was popular then, so that's what he kept singing around the house all week. I'm not gonna make him go to rehab. Okay. Just let that roll off my back. So he did not show up for the first day of the intervention, but he came the second day when we read all of our letters to him. And he went. He went. And that's when the healing began. Because Jeremy went off to treatment, and basically so did I. I got my ass in Al-Anon, and I started doing some work. See, I know how to do recovery. I know how to stay clean and sober. I know how not to use, but I did not know how not to take care of my son. That I did not know how to do. And that's what I learned. So Jeremy stayed sober for a while, and then he relapsed, and so did I with him. I started helping him with his rent, started making sure he had money for his groceries, and before we knew it, we were back in that spiral again, where I was doing what I shouldn't have been doing, and so was he. But then I came out of it, and I separated, and when Jeremy really, really hit bottom that last time, and he came to me and he wanted help again, wanted me to pay for treatment again, and I said, no, I'm done. You need to figure it out. So he called Kristina, and we got the option to do the show, which was a blessing. It was a blessing for him, and it was a blessing for me because I got to get strong again. And this time, Kristina said, when he went off to treatment, that we were gonna have no contact for 90 days. Now, I don't know if any of you saw that show, but my son went ballistic over that, of not having contact with me, because I always take care of things for him. He did not like that at all, but I held strong. I did not have contact with him. I talked to Kristina, and Jeremy talked to Kristina, but we did not talk to each other. We needed to separate so we could become whole people on our own. So when my son relapsed again a year ago at Henry Olaf, I said, I hope you're okay. And off he went. He lived on the streets, he stayed at a friend's house, but I did not help him. He will have 6 months and 9 days. He came back, but I did not go out that time. I stayed strong in my codependency. And that is the brilliance of this intervention, right? You don't need the addict, you need the codependent, and your life will change, because mine did. And I can't thank Kristina enough. She really saved my life and my son's. Thank you.
I am going to be 60 in a few weeks. I've been drinking for over 40 years in my life. And I married for the second time to a man who was quite depressed, and it got worse as the years went on. He was not my first husband. He was not the father to my children. But I thought I could fix him. That's talking about codependence besides being an addict myself. And my big thing in life would be that I would fix this man that was just needed me to function. And as I said, it got worse over the years, and my drinking got worse over the years because I was not succeeding in what I had planned. But this was an unconscious plan. I did not know It was not out on the table, not out in the open. And toward the end, which was like Kristina said, it was 2010, and it was probably around April when my daughter called me and said, "Mom, I want to have an intervention. I want you to come over and I want Doug to come over, and it's going to be over a weekend." It was Mother's Day's weekend. And I said, "Well, I have to think about it." And Doug and I went on all the websites we could find about Kristina and the colleague that she was doing this intervention with, because Kristina had a gentleman there as well. And Doug became quite upset and felt very scared. And I said, "What are you scared about? This is about me, don't you get it? It talks about an addict, and that's really me. I know what my kids are doing here." But I didn't think that it was that serious, because as far as I was concerned, an intervention was like Joan was saying, it's the secret, it's that surprise. And I said, no, it's not going to be like that, and I'm not that way, I'm not that bad off, I'm not a meth addict, I'm not crazy that way, so it's not going to be that bad. And of course they will have to understand that I need to stay home, because at this time I was the only one bringing money into the family. Doug had not been working for over a year. So I said, they will understand, and I will maybe go to some AA, and of course they will see that I need to make the money. So when I went to the intervention, the first day, I felt like this was interesting, good education, and I was all for it. I was a little guarded. They asked us at one time, my daughter and my son and my sister was there, and my son-in-law, and they asked me, and actually Doug's sister was also there, came up from Los Angeles. So they asked me after a while for us all to step into the room and make a line, and everybody have to step forward if they think that Eva or Doug was going to succeed or go, or how it was going. I stepped way up front saying, this is going great, I'm enjoying it, this is interesting. My whole family I saw was way back. They didn't think it was going as great as I thought. And we went home that night, Doug and I, and I know that Kristina had asked my family not to contact me. We were alone. And I had stopped drinking the 7th of May because I was going to be clean and sober for this intervention. And the next day came and we went back, and it got a little bit more scary for me. I felt that my secret was more tender. I couldn't hide it as much. And I was scared. I was scared to be found out. I was scared to admit to that maybe I need help. I was scared to losing my control, my footing. And I was scared of what Doug would do. Coming home a year prior to that and finding him in bed almost dead had made me just focus on him, because now I was really in charge here. I had to fix Doug, so it became very intense the last year, and I withdrew from my family completely. My kids didn't like Doug anymore because he became very controlling, so they had made, more or less said, we don't want him to come to parties, we don't want him to be around Christmas, and of course I chose to be with Doug because I felt sorry for him. He was so depressed, he was suicidal, I couldn't leave his side. So I really pulled away from my whole family. I was angry with them that they couldn't understand. I felt not heard. I drank more. I hid more. And I also was using Ambien and Ativan. I blacked out every night in bed. And I went to work the next morning. So this was now the time, and I felt that I couldn't hide behind Doug's depression anymore. And I think part of me, which was not visible to me, or I couldn't feel it, wished in many ways that they were going to be stronger than me, and that they were going to catch me and say, you're going, that's it, and force me to go. But I'm a rebellious, I am thinking I know best, and I still do, but I'm trying to learn that you can't do things by yourself. And there was one point in the intervention that I completely broke down. And that's when Kristina, and I forgot his name, Jim said, okay, it doesn't look like Eva's going to go. So now what we need to do is focus on the rest of the family. We need to move on. Eva is obviously not going to do this. Doug is obviously not going to go to his treatment program. So let's talk about the family. That point, I broke down. I ran out of the room, hid in a closet downstairs, and was just sobbing. I didn't know what to do myself. It got so scary. I felt like they're giving up on me. And God, they can't give up on me now. I am now feeling so vulnerable. And I know if I were to leave, and if I could run out, I would have hidden, I would have been on the run, and I would have killed myself. There was many times in my life that I wanted to kill myself, and I've had some attempts. And I was convinced that I couldn't live through the humiliation. And my disease was so progressed, I couldn't function without the wine, I couldn't function without the Ativan, I couldn't function without the Ambien, I couldn't function without the Scotch when nothing else worked. I couldn't go to sleep unless I blacked out. I couldn't tolerate my life unless I was numb. And my sister came down to my room and she said, it's okay, Eva, it's okay. We're here, we love you, we're not judging you, want her to come up. And she coached me to come up. And I felt like I've never felt in my life. I felt like I wanted to walk in the room in a fetal position and just cry. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want anybody to talk to me. I wanted them to pack me in a suitcase and me just to deliver me somewhere. And I was so grateful that Jim and Kristina sat down with my family and figured out, because I said, I can't afford this, I'm the only one bringing money in, we don't have money, and if my family rallied together immediately and said, it's paid for, Eva, we're going to do it, you're leaving today. And I was praying it wasn't going to be a hard time finding tickets. I didn't say any of this. First of all, I was just so humiliated. I didn't feel I had a voice. I'd been crying so much, I just felt like turd. And they all sat together at the dining room table and figured it out. And I was not so sure about my family as I was with that Kristina and Jim was going to be there and sort of hoover over them and make sure it happened today, that I would have no time to be by myself, to my own device, and have any kind of sneak time to run out of there, because I didn't want to be seen. I did not want to be seen. So they arranged for a ticket that day, and Doug came up to me and said, you know, not just to me, to everybody, what are you all going to do for me? I can't live like this, and can I come to you, Heidi, and be here with you, because Eva's going to go, and I'm going to need help, I'm going to need you. And Kristina and the rest of the family, and they turned to Doug's sister Carol and said, we need to take care of him, he needs to go to treatment, he needs to go today as well. So that made me feel, thank God, he's safe, I'm going to go. And Doug and I sat down on the couch and did our goodbye and cried, and he cried more than I, and he was more scared than I. And I remember being conscious enough to say, why the fuck is he crying so much? This is about me. And I was really annoyed with him. But this started now to percolate, because he had been such a weight on me for years, that I finally started to think that maybe I didn't have to do this anymore. So I went to treatment that day, and my sister went home with me and helped me pack. She didn't leave my side. My sister came with me on the plane and delivered me in Oregon, and where a driver picked me up and took me off to Hazelden. And while I was in Hazelden, not only did I know that my counselor there was in touch with Kristina, and I got news about how Kristina was in touch with my family, so I felt she was there, sort of holding my family, guiding me, and being sort of part of the program. My husband tried to commit suicide 3 times while I was in the program, and each time it got clearer and clearer to me how it was manipulations in order to get me back, to that life. And if it wasn't for Kristina sort of hoovering over my family, because I still was not sure that they were going to be strong enough, that I couldn't talk them out of this good enough, I felt that she was there. And I did come back, I stayed in sober living, at Jim's sober living, actually. And I did move into my own apartment. I'm now leaving my apartment, and my divorce is going to be settled the 7th of June, so that'll be 6 days from now. And he's still trying to get me back. He's not going to Al-Anon, he's not having, does not have any help, but I have all the help I can need. I have a great sponsor. I know Kristina is there in my back pocket. I can text her, and she's still very much in my mind and there for me. And I thank her and everybody else that's been supportive to me. I'm very active in AA. Like I said, I have a great sponsor. I'm going away tomorrow to Oregon and celebrate 1 year with my peers. We're all going to go up in the mountains.